welcome to AoScast19, where we do some Q&A and then review the GHB. Apologies for the delay. I moved and then had a big contract to work on, but I sent out a Twitter poll about this channel and the size and frequency of my shows. And more frequent, even if smaller, won out over less frequent but huge. As you've no doubt noticed, my shows are all getting to be like 2+ hours long, which is a fine painting companion, but people want more frequency, so, give the people what they want, right? Wait, you are following me on Twitter, right? I do FAQ and other AOS news, live tweet reactions, memes, and updates on show progress, plus rules questions. Also, take requests for AoScast Q&A, though patrons get first dibs. Find me at HeyWoah_Twitch. The support from Patreon has been great. I was honestly expecting maybe 2 people at most, plus my mom to donate, plus Doom and Darkness, so both parents, I guess. But instead, 15 people have, which is awesome. A few more of those and I can start saying no to a contract here or there to make more shows. Anyway, special thanks to Bjarni, Carl Martin Rosenberg, Carson Blake Phipps, Charles Fadouk, Doom and Darkness, Edward Lawrence, Greg Dykus, Jacob Graham, Jens Nielsen, Kyle Zmerchik, Michael Derazinski, Miguel Cabezas, Perna, Richard Rossman, Sean, Warbound, and Windigo. Your generous support keeps me getting your generous support. And as much as I joke about stuff like that, it has real impact and it means a lot. So I finally finished moving, and also waiting for the big FAQ to come out, which was to balance the armies that came out too late to hit the GHB, them being FEC, Skaven, Khorne, Fyreslayers, and Slaanesh. After all, there were a lot of rumors about how big this FAQ was going to be, some going as far as claiming it'd include War Scroll and Allegiance rules that couldn't make it into the book. Spoiler, obviously not. Toxic positivity peddlers that scolded people for calling a bad change should now apologize. But what is a GHB for anyway? Number 1, updated points cost for all units and all factions with an eye towards game balance with increases for stuff that's too good, and more importantly by far, decreases for stuff that sucks or no one plays. I get that you're a model company, so give us a good excuse to put most of them on the table already. Number 2, updated battle plans for the next year of tournaments and local match play games. Number 3, Allegiance abilities for armies that haven't gotten a 2nd edition update book and probably won't in the next year. And number 4, 50 pages of other crap that no one cares about at all. Now that we've finally embraced digital updates, I'd like to continue to champion something I honestly expected them to already be doing, as a person who got into AOS from Magic and also online games. Patch notes for their changes. Explain yourself and your reasoning, both so we get a better idea of what you intend, so we can make better inferences and future unanswered questions, and because when you have to explain yourself on a platform, you inevitably have to put more thought and research into your opinions than if you just quietly shift numbers around in the background. Also, it can really soften potential backlash. Imagine if Just As Deadly was instead new book on the way. That would have been a good one. Kyle Zmerchik asks, Darkling Covens, are they good now? Why or why not? It's weird that they seem on paper like they should be good, but clearly not. Curious how you think the new movement spells help. I'm tempted to say that the new movement spells aren't necessarily required for Darkling Covens, although they certainly fit right in with spellcasters that on average tend to have a +2 or 3 to cast. And it's not even a shame what happened to Bringy Dingy. You shouldn't be able to move after a teleport. Blackguard going down to 120 was awesome for Darkling Covens. It's a shame they didn't get natural 6s for Executioners, or updated Allegiance abilities, or spell lores, or, the list goes on. But, a good change is a good change, and I like Blackguards at 120/320. What can you do with Darkling Covens right now? Well, their battalion is actually pretty good right now. Against all this always strikes first nonsense, you can once per game choose a unit and have it charge in the hero phase and then fight in the hero phase after charging. Seems pretty good for a big unit of Executioners or Blackguard in my opinion. Secondly, their 6-inch move, +3 with Decanter of Egos, and you have a command point for run and charge. So they're actually decently fast. It's a shame their other Allegiance command ability, Inspire Hatred, just lets you reroll 1s to wound, which was added as a default command ability in this book. So it would have been nice if they got something that wasn't just the same as a default one in the same book, but I guess they didn't have time to look into it. And yeah, I think the faction has more legs than its results seem to indicate. Although the results should be tempered with the understanding that almost no one plays this army at all. So it doesn't, have a proper amount of statistics or anything. And yes, it has weaknesses, of course. Sorceress on Black Dragon is completely unplayable, so you gotta play with the foot hero ones, and if you snipe those, then that's a problem. But, you know, if you're just talking about the fat middle that Vince was just mentioning on the show yesterday, I think Darkling Covens could comfortably sit there. Here's a list I tooled up, for instance. We got 3 Sorceress, one with Master of Sorcerer's Arts for an extra +1 to cast, another with Decanter of Egos for a +3 move to all those around her, and another with Anklet of Epiphany for another +1 to cast, if near terrain. So Arcane's a pretty good choice there. And don't forget, they can sacrifice the idiots around them for another +2 to cast. So these ladies are on +3. As such, we've given them a lot of endless spells. You got 30 Blackguard, 30 Executioners, and yes, Executioners are destroyed by -1 to hit penalties, but you're actually not that bad at unbinding, so you should try to unbind those spells. And you gotta bet big to win big, you're in the fat middle, as they say. 3 of 10 Bleak Swords for bodies camping somewhere or getting sacrificed to Sorceress, whichever you choose. 6 Achillean Morsar Guard for your Cavalry ally, which will add a lot to the list. And then you got some endless spells. Geminids always, Malevolent Maelstrom probably always, and then your choice of Soul Snare Shackles if you like control, or the newly reduced Purple Sun if you're a party animal. And yeah, I think a list like this would be perfectly serviceable. Is it amazing? No. But is it F tier, like the army statistically kind of is? I don't think so either. It's just not many people play them right now, and I think any with even a passing interest in it are kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop on whatever the elf soup books that are no doubt on the way are going to cook up for them. I think that's my take on Covens. Moving on in the Patreon questions, Sean would like to know, he'd be interested in seeing a post-Journals Handbook 2019 battle line units comparison for Stormcast Eternals. Sure thing. You got 4 options that can be battle line. Liberators, Vanguard Hunters, Sequitors, and Judicators. Let's go through them in cheapest to most expensive. 100 points for Liberators, 10 wounds, 4 up save, rolling 1s. 1 to 4 damage against armor 4, so dangerously close to no offensive output at all. 5-inch move, so slow. Actively bad, but the cheapest tax you can pay. Massive Regiment is a ridiculous 30 models on 40mm bases for 520. This is 60 wounds, and the front line of 6 special guys still only do about 2 to 8 damage unbuffed. Stormcast were supposed to be elite heroic humans, but Liberators are actually just fat and bad at everything. On one hand, what do you want for 100 points? And on the other hand, what a whole bunch of armies have. Amazing shit for 100 or fewer points. They don't work as the bodies every army needs because they sit in the perfect triangle of too expensive and too elite and bad. This generally forces Stormcast Eternals to ally in stuff that the army should just have, which is cheap bodies, like skinks. In my opinion, the failure that is Liberators is one of the main sources of SCE's problems that trickle down to the rest of the faction, and one that has stubbornly gone unfixed for 3 books now. I sure wish they cost 80 or something, with a more attainable Massive Regiment. For the 110 point category, we have Vanguard Hunters now. Same defense, but no rerolling 1s. 2 to 5 damage if you include their crossbows and their melee, which sadly have a 9-inch range. 0 to 3 damage if they don't get to shoot, like when you're fighting on your opponent's turn. They are faster with 6-inch move. Astral Compass lets you use a worse deep strike than the one they already have if they want to land outside 7 instead of 9, but it's wholly within a battlefield edge. So yeah, you can shoot, but only about 6 of them will be in range because their bases are huge. Could have really thought that one through more the first time or the second time when the new book came out. I mean, oh well, at least they can run and shoot. I sure wish they were cheaper or had longer range. Or both. 130 point Sequitors. If Liberators were a failure, and in my personal opinion they completely were, then Sequitors are a success. 4 up save, rerolling failed, now we're talking. 3 to 8 damage, which is good, or can just reroll 1s to save and do 4 to 10 damage instead. Nice. Here's a home base that with 10 or so can not just reasonably defend, but actually kill something. Problem. You have to take an expensive taxman as your general. Either the Arcanum on foot, which you don't want to do for 160, or the Arcanum on mount, that you also don't want to do, but could maybe justify using for 220. I sure wish they were just Stormcast Battle Line. I don't see what the problem would have been. Rounding out battle line at the most expensive, we have 160 point Judicators, with a 4-up save, 5-inch move, and 24-inch shots with rend. Nice. Low attacks per model, sure, but the leader hits on 2s and his hits explode into d6 wounds, which means you don't lose much firepower as the unit takes casualties. Because the leader has the most power, you always want to run minimum unit sizes. They're good battle line and can still affect the game while camping an objective. 1 to 5 damage at range on average, though spiky. Problem: very expensive. Their higher cost means some minor range damage on my 3-min battle line is already 480 points, which is enough to turn most away. I sure wish they were like 130. These guys are way too high. So which one is the best? This is hard because they all have major flaws and are all too expensive. Sequitors are the only ones with a good cost in a vacuum, but they have a massive tax elsewhere in order to satisfy battle line, which brings them back up to really expensive again. This is, in my opinion, one of the main problems with SCE, the domino effects all the way down to unsatisfying lists and even poor results. There just isn't a good foundation to build your house on. Why aren't Paladins battle line if a Celestant is the general? Or Dracoths if Vandus Hammerhand is? Or Dracolines if Evocator on Dracoline? Or Prosecutors just period? Whatever, enough wish listing. In my opinion, Judicators and Hunters are just not worth it. Hunters because they're too shit, and Judicators because they're too expensive. The way I see it, you have 2 options. 1, you eat the shit sandwich and take an Evocator on Dracoline because he's good, but overpriced, and maybe you didn't really want him, but here he is. And then use Sequitors because they can actually do something. Minimum cost, 610, oof. Or 1,000 for 10-man units that have real punch and staying power. The plight of elite armies, I guess. Or 2, just accept that you have to play 300 points down, and take 3 units of barely living warm bodies to stand near your initial objectives before they're killed on the charge by literally anything in the game on turn 1. This at least gives you an extra 310 points to play with than option 1, to try to make your list interesting in some way. I wish I had a better answer for you, I really do, but to me it just seems like 4 bad choices. Perhaps the Stormcast grinders can cook up something in the lab that proves promising, but whenever I try to build a list, it never looks like a complete army until about 2,300 points. Just take 3 units of Liberators because they're the cheapest, I guess. We can only hope that the 4th attempt at a Stormcast book will be allowed to have fun. So I wrote a big thing about what all the factions needed for internal and external balance, then came back to it to see what happened after these changes. We'll hit nerfs and buffs required, most important issues, tier, and grade for each faction. I couldn't help editing some of my initial thoughts for entertainment value, but I tried to keep it to a minimum, sorry. Beast of Chaos, Tier 1-5 leading up to GHB19. They achieved this almost exclusively on the back of Enlightened on Disc spam, but the successes were rare. Most Neapolitan BOC players had about a 50% win rate. Nerf required? No, not for Tier 1-5, and 50% win rate. Non-spam lists actually need quite a buff. While Enlightened on Discs could go up 10 or 20 in a vacuum, the real issue with BOC is how bad almost everything else is. Buff required? Yes, in the form of a critical, almost do-over on the cost of honestly almost everything in this army, both in a vacuum and how they relate to each other. This stuff is just really out of whack. The best 2 battalions, before you look at any costs, are then also the cheapest by 50, and the bad ones are 200. The better rules costing less, and the worse rules costing more feels backwards. Bulgors, Dragon Ogres, Beast Lord, Cockatrices, Shaggoths, Skinwolves, every endless spell, every monster, all these are simply pointed incorrectly high, particularly Bulgors, battalions, and the monsters. Your only 2 awesome looking centerpiece monsters, Cygor and Gorgon, who come in the Start Collecting by the way, are both unplayable. Now I probably throw that term around too often, but I'm going to take an arrow from Tom Lyon's quiver here. Let me be clear. There's miscosted, and then there's having a cost so wrong that it isn't even in the same dimension as correct, and that's where these 2 sit. I shit you not, the competitively pushed cost for slow non-flying monster that can't hold an artifact and charts hard like Gorgon is 120. And Cygor actually breaks the points costing mechanic of the game. At 100, he's still technically overcosted as a 14 wound monster. Incredible. But this is the level of up Whoever wrote these rules fucked. Most important thing, BOC players I talked to were nearly unanimous with this one. Make Bulgors worth playing. The way to do that is to drop them in points, not raise other stuff. They have 2 attacks per model and hit on 4s. Our hands are tied. You made them worth 120 and then put them at 160 because they look big and 3 damage weapons are distracting to people who can't do math, I guess. So what changed? Most important issue was completely ignored. No change to Bulgors and they are still bad. The community article says that upping Enlightened makes Bulgors a more tempting choice, which is laughably wrong. Who is comparing flying cavalry to slow foot troops with bad save that miss all the time? They have 2 different roles, for one, and secondly, people will still take Enlightened because their role is useful, and Bulgor's job is done better in every way for cheaper with Bestigor. If you're comparing anything, it'd be to them. And Bestigor are balanced at 120. And they didn't even bother trying to drop Cygor or Gorgon at all, they just kept them the same. The reductions they needed were extreme, sure, but man, nothing. Enlightened up 20, so up 60 per 9-man unit. This is a considerable increase, though it's still possible to play 18 Enlightened plus Anvil lists. The best ones are well and truly harmed by this, and BOC as a whole got nothing in return. Bulgors, Dragon Ogres, Shoggoth, Monsters, Beast Lord, Battalions all left unchanged. Dirgehorn and Taurus Endless Spell went down 10 and 20 respectively, which is right, they were too expensive, but super minor. Shaman on Disc saw a 20-point reduction, which is curious, as it was already an auto-include at 180, and better than Shoggoth for the same price, and he didn't go down. Gors went down 10 per 30, which is largely irrelevant. Incomprehensibly, Razor Gors, a unit that is bad and no one plays, went up 10. So it will go from bad and never played to bad and never played. What is this book even for? Side note, a decent percentage of BOC players I talked to didn't even know what this thing was, and they play the army. After looking it up, we had a good laugh at how bad it is, and now it's worse, so I guess well done. Grade F. Really starting off on the wrong foot here. BOC's points needs were obvious enough to be mostly slam dunks. This one should have been easy. You didn't need esoteric metagame insight to make good progress on the majority of Beasts of Chaos's issues. Like, even a cursory 15 minutes of checking costs and war scrolls by somebody who's just good at the game would have been better changes here. They definitely didn't even try to look at any of this shit. Blades of Khorne, top of tier 2, maybe bottom of 1.5, almost exclusively due to Tyrants of Blood Battalion, allowing multiple Bloodthirsters to chain strikes first onto each other. Mortal lists tend not to do as well, and also Khorne is very popular, so there's a lot of people playing it, and they lose a lot. A little under 50% win rate. Nerf required. No, not if you just care about how strong an army is, as they aren't, problematic in the metagame at all. But yes, if you want to backpedal on the Pandora's box of activation wars you opened, and I think they should. Currently there are some admittedly sick combos with Halo of Blood, allowing you to pull in all your Bloodthirsters and a Tyrant's Battalion to fight beginning of combat, because the first one does, and then each other one gets to activate still at the beginning of combat. And cuter ones like Bloodmaster attacking and then pulling in 30 Bloodletters before the opponent gets to go, and stuff like that. Like Flesh Eater Courts, these are unconditional and work on the opponent's turn. I'm not normally interested in nerfing any army that, results-wise, clearly doesn't deserve it, but if it were me, I'd change Halo of Blood to be on the charge only, and then buff a lot of other stuff to compensate. Buff required, yes. Mortals are currently lagging far behind Daemons by a decent clip, and many units could get a clean haircut. Mortals are just too slow, and require too many buffs to be good. And the positioning requirements to make all your Holy Within buffs work is like $10 effort for $5 results. Removing Holy Within from Wrathmongers to me is high on the list, as is unnerfing their buff to affect ranged units again. The slow, Rendless Skull Reapers could also comfortably go down 20. Korgus Cool and Lord of Khorne on Juggernaut could both easily drop 20 as well, and Blood Warriors should finally go to 80/480 for a massive regiment. It's not 1st edition anymore. They don't even get special weapons at MSU, it's fine. Wishlist, please remove Blood Tithe being reset to 0 after you use it. I mean, you guys made Slaanesh, let them do it. Most important issue, honestly, it's the quality of life upgrades, like easing up on either Holy Within language or increasing ranges, Blood Tithe not resetting, and striking the FAQ on Wrathmongers, so they work like your head rules designer said live on Warhammer TV before it was changed 2 weeks later after people bought some. So what changed? Most important issues were ignored. Nerfed a different and worse Tyrants of Blood combo with a different slaughter host via the FAQ. Nice shot, but you missed. This was, if anything, the second thing to nerf after Halo of Blood, if they were to get any nerfs at all, but okay. Valkia was confirmed not a demon, and then went up 20. Not sure why this needed to happen at all, because she's okay, like maybe good, but she can't hold an artifact, so whatever. Bloodsecrator went down 20, which is, like, totally unnecessary. He's an auto-include, but I mean, it's welcome. Cool, give him more points. All the Bloodthirsters went down, which is strange since Tyrants of Blood was already by far the best build and nothing was even close. Buffing Khorne isn't too dangerous considering they're only in, like, tier 2/1/5. But this does, however, leave mortals even further behind, and nothing at all was done to help the many subpar units with that keyword. Grade, I gotta say F. Nerfed the wrong thing. All the FAQs were terrible. One written so stupidly it probably needs a second FAQ to fix it, and they did nothing to help the many obvious weak units and strategies. This one as well should have been easy. Disciples of Tzeentch. Technically tier 1/5 moving into GHB 19, but this is complicated. They're very difficult to play, and they have very low representation. 2 builds excelled, though in very, very small numbers. Most people got blown the fuck up. Enlightened on Disc spam and Change Host. Nerfs required, not for their tier, but Enlightened on Disc could go up a bit, and I suppose they did, because we found that out in Beast of Chaos earlier. Buffs required, yes, but don't go crazy. Some dialing back of the big-time increases they saw moving into 2nd edition is probably in order, as they were excessive. Kairos and Lord of Change both are in a strange spot. On their own, they're both very overpriced, and somewhere in the 320 area would make much more sense and kind of bring them into 2nd edition. The issue is Change Host has been extremely problematic in the past, and this kind of reduction to the Lords in an effort to support, normal Tzeentch would just make Change Host that much cheaper. As such, both Greater Daemons should go down 60, but Change Host should go up by whatever total amount you drop everything in this book. Time is also a factor to keep in mind, and Change Host games waste an almost unacceptably large amount of it. Also, for wish listing, a better summoning table, please. Most important issue, dial back some of the heavy-handed points increases from 2nd edition while keeping a sharp eye on the brutal negative play experience that is Change Host. So what changed? Plus 20 per Enlightened on Disc, whatever. This matters less in Tzeentch than it does in Beast of Chaos, to be honest. Buffs received nearly across the board 10 and 20 point drops, but no help for the Greater Daemons, and Change Host is back, baby. How fun. Can't wait. Grade D+. Tzeentch had a clear need, and GW mostly did the thing. While they could have done more here and less there, the result is a considerable buff for a faction that, now that I think about it, it's in the same tier as Beast of Chaos, who just took a net nerf. Well, lack of consistency aside, that's not Tzeentch's fault, though. Just doubles down on how huge of a failure Beast of Chaos was. I would have liked Lord of Change and Kairos to join 2nd edition monster costs in the low 300s, but when we're dealing with Change Host, and we will be moving forward, hence the D, I suppose better safe than sorry. Surely they playtested these changes, right? Everchosen. In the last 12,000 games we collected statistics for, 3 people played Everchosen, and they got bodied. As such, they don't really have a tier, but it ain't good. Nerfs required, no. Buffs required, Ren 3 Slayer of Kings, please. And Vanguard are still too expensive. But really they need a Battle Tome, or if GW is feeling particularly responsible, GHB Allegiance abilities. Narrator. They were not feeling particularly responsible. Grade D. This would be lower, but I understand why they didn't overhaul this faction in the GHB. The Grand Marshal of the Apocalypse and his legions is probably too important campaign-wise to toss some scraps like that, saving their next release for a major story arc. The Everchosen version of God Summoner went to 180, which is whatever, and Vanguard had their now annual tradition of never being played and going down in points. They have now, in total, and from 2017 to 2018 to 2019, gone from 360 for 3 to 260 for 3, and they still aren't good. Thanks guys, maybe next year. Hedonites of Slaanesh. Leading into GHB 19, they are at the very top of Tier 1, with many warning that even though it's early, they are absolutely S tier. We'll see. They just might be. This is due to their activation wars, speed, damage, and prodigious summoning. They are universally fragile though, and suffer in strange ways depending on the matchup, like if your opponent has no multi-wound creatures. The two main builds are Good Stuff Slaanesh and Slaanesh featuring a shitload of Bestigor, who are way, way better in this army than Beast of Chaos, now tripling down on the Beast of Chaos section's failure. Nerfs required, yes. Contorted Epitome is pretty undercosted by, I think, about 40 points, and they might have gone a little too hard on Allegiance abilities, which complicates balancing with points. Buffs required, no, but Fiends weren't good before and then went up, so this could certainly be walked back. Also, Shalaxi could be a flat 300. Most important issue, Activation War responsibly. This one's random and tied to hero positioning, so not as insane as Always Works Always On of a Grizzlegore general, but it's for every hero all over the place, and 2 up on keepers. Balancing this is made more difficult by the fact that failing your 2 or 4 up for the opponent to strike last means that you are completely dead, because your defense is horrible. How much would change if it was target unit strikes first instead of your opponent strikes last, besides alleviating a bunch of rules nightmares? So what happened? Nothing. 2 months wasn't enough time to do anything, so I for one welcome our new Slaaneshi overlords. Grade D. But why a D? I mean, it's Slaanesh. But anyway, didn't you say that 2 months wasn't really enough time to figure them out? I did. But the FAQ they released to try to explain the rules of strikes last interacting with other rules from the game was shit and resulted in worsening the activation wars, to be honest. Also, it doesn't take 2 months to realize Fiends suck and the Epitome is way too good. Maggotkin of Nurgle, lowish tier 2. Mostly churning around the high 40% mark with a few isolated good finishes from Thricefold Befoulment. Nerfs required? Certainly not. Buffs required? Yes, and many. Your battalions, except for Thricefold, are all extremely overcosted, with most sitting at 200 or more points. That's too high. They need to come down drastically, into the 150s. On internal balance, Nurgle suffers almost as much as BOC or Stormcast. There's a sharp points divide between good and bad units in this army. Your unique heroes like Morbidax, Orgots, and Blowab could very easily be 200 flat. Lord of Afflictions could be 180. Slimix, could be actually 180, even 160. Spoom should be 120 because he can't hold an artifact, and Puskull Blightlords need to go down at least 40 or more. It's only 2 guys. Most important issue, Putrid Blight King's War Scroll needs to be updated for 2nd edition with the natural 6th language added. This would be the best push the army could get to encourage diversity. If you only do one thing, do this. So what happened? Blight Kings are still stuck in 1st edition and for that matter largely on the shelf. Many heroes I mentioned received the tiniest of ticks down, resulting in absolutely nothing changing at all. Affliction and Blightcyst both got a tiny tick down as well, but again, not enough to make a real difference. One key note is they reduced Puskull Blightlords to 200, the same cost as Plague Drones, which is an important step in GW's journey of discovery. So now they at least admit that Blightlords are not better than drones. So soon they might realize that number of models in a unit actually matters when you have access to extra attack buffs, not to mention for capturing, and hence drones are better. Maybe next year. Grade F. You had 1 job. Well, not really, you had 2 jobs, but you did nothing for the former and reduced points so impotently with the latter that I wonder if they were trying to do anything at all. Skaven. S tier. While FEC is the most powerful army, Skaven is the best. Skaven is quite simply insane, and whoever wrote these rules and point cost of this book was as well. These points are off by so much I can only assume they put a new guy on this book. I hope he's learning a thing or two. Sometimes failure is the best teacher. Nerfs required more than any other army, even Flesh Eater Courts. FEC is a one-trick pony, so the fix is easy. Skaven has such an expansive toolbox of broken, undercosted crap that it can very easily roll with any 1 or 2 nerfs and still be thoroughly overpowered, and still in the broken tier. The points on this stuff just doesn't make any fucking sense, and its lazy, thoughtless blanket plus 20 to random stuff would just be pissing in the ocean. Here's a thought experiment for those at home who don't play Skaven, just as an example. You're in charge of point costing a new War Scroll. It's a wizard hero on foot, 5 wounds. 5 up save, 6-inch move. When you activate him in combat, he can retreat instead of attack. Casts and unbinds 2 spells per turn. The first spell he casts each turn he rolls 3d6 drop the lowest for. Unless the 3d6 result is 13, then it autocasts and can't be unbound. His 2 spells are a teleport that casts on a 6 for target friendly unit within 13 of him to teleport anywhere outside of 9 from enemies, and his second spell is a debuff that gives -1 to hit and does a d3 mortal wounds at short range. What do you make him cost? Time's up. If anybody said 120, congratulations, you too could have been just as fucking wrong as whoever wrote this book. So that's Gracier on foot. And he was 120 when the book came out. For a double caster, double unbinder, 3d6 drop, the lowest spellcaster with access to a teleport that in combat he can run away when he activates, the 180 probably. The version on the bell should be 300, Plague Priest on Furnace should go to 260, Vermin Lord Warpseer should go up to 340, at which he is still great. Plague Monks are the big one. Currently they cost 240 for 40, which is crazy. Warp Lightning Vortex has 2 options. Rewrite the War Scroll from the ground up with an entirely different effect so it's not the biggest negative play experience since Wildwoods, or increased its points cost beyond playability, which is never a fix I like and usually a very lazy one. Buffs required? No. Even stuff they don't consider worth playing, like Storm Vermin, Deceiver, and Weapon Teams, would be regularly ran and perform well in some other faction's army. It's not that they aren't good, it's that Skaven stuff is incredible. That being said, Mulder and Eshin could use some love. I'm not heartless. Most important issue, tie between Warp Lightning Vortex Rewrite and Plague Monks no cheaper than 340. So what happened? Warp Lightning Vortex FAQ'd to 13-inch range instead of 26 on the initial setup. Though it's important to note that the next 2 pieces of it you set up are 7 inches farther than that, and then their effect area is 6 inches past that. So yes, you're still turn 1 hitting people on the 18-inch deployment battle plans, of which about half of them are. Also, the army has a hero phase teleport if you really need to get in that full range. Now what this does do is open the spell up to unbinding, which helps in the aggregate, but still ruins every game it resolves in, so still broken and still kind of a failure of balancing. The other half of the most important issue was Plague Monks going from 240 for 40 to 340 for 40, and they went up to 280. I can safely confirm no one on rules has played against Pestilence units before in a real game. Still wickedly broken, and more than that, extremely annoying to play with. That War Scroll has you roll and re-roll so many different fucking things. Honestly, do yourself a favor, and unless you have a 2-up save or a 4-up shrug, just take whatever off they attack. It'll save you 5 minutes of real time, and your opponent will thank you. Gracier on Foot, Gracier on Bell, and Plague Furnace all went up by only 20, so they're still completely broken. Like 140 for Gracier on Foot? That's as much as Butcher costs from Gutbusters. I mean, come on. Oh, man. Warpseer went up 40 to 300, which is still low for a 13-wound double-casting hero, with a 52-inch diameter Battleshock immunity aura, plus a 4-up re-rollable save, plus 2 different 5-up Feel No Pains that stack, making you nearly immune to damage statistically. Hell Pit Abomination went up, and I suppose I get it, they were low-key good, but did you really change enough for people to flock to janky strats like that? I would take that better safe than sorry energy you used over there and make better changes on the previous stuff. Storm Vermin and Rattling Gun went down a good amount, which is puzzling, but I guess whatever. Storm Vermin were good before, but I guess good is not good enough for Skaven. Grade F. The biggest offenders were touched with extremely light care, considering how unbalanced their initial points were. So light in fact that honestly nothing changes here, and many of the other strongest armies got, actual big boy nerfs, instead of fake ones like these. While their points indeed went up per army list, what they are doing on the table is not significantly restricted in a meaningful way. The strategy is the same, or possibly more focused and better now even. Also, the Balewind Skitterly ruling literally breaks their own rules and allows Skaven to teleport with it when no one else is allowed to. Slaves to Darkness, bottom of F tier, statistically the worst army in the game next to stuff people played once and lost every game with, like Tamarkan's Horde. Nerfs acquired, god no, they have a 26% win rate, but spoiler, they fucking got some, can you believe it? Buffs required, yes, they need those expanded and redone allegiance rules they were promised. Real bad. Their points aren't terrible depending on what new rules they get, as many are used as allies already in other armies, though Chaos Knights should probably be 140. Most important thing, look, they have a 26% win rate, and their 2018 Allegiance abilities were worse than GA. If you buffed them so thoroughly that they perform twice as well as they are now, they would still only win half their games. So what happened? They copy and pasted with no changes the Allegiance abilities and command traits from last year. The unplayably bad ones. And for the artifacts, which were also bad before, 3 are the same, and 3 do the same thing, only got worse. Like, they used to buff Bravery by 2, and now it's by 1. Like, they got worse. Why? This is supposed to be what the General's Handbook is for, and what you said you would do. And then you didn't. And on top of that, you made the worst army worse. Clearly, I needed a letter grade below F on my grading scale. I should have thought ahead. I choose L. Well, that wraps up Chaos. So far, it's a shit show of zero effort and missed opportunities. Yippee, let's plow ahead. Flesh Eater Courts. Skaven might be the best army in the game, but Flesh Eater Courts is the most powerful. Top of S tier, the army that caused the activation wars in the first place, and dominated top tables to a degree that can safely be called oppressive. Always strike first on their super damaging, super fast, super durable, healing, mortal wound shitting, spell casting general that even without strikes first is better than any other combat monster in the game. 400 point range, 500 point range, 600 point range, nothing competes. And then it also summons a unit for free on turn 1. This thing can single-handedly table an army that doesn't have kryptonite, that is, heavy ranged firepower that doesn't rely on rend since it's usually ethereal, or activation wars of their own, but then that only works on their turn. But even beyond that, the army is still super strong and has lots of free undercosted summoning attached to every hero. Nerf required, of course, but luckily the answer is easy. Grizzlegor's strikes first should only work on the charge instead of always, and Gruesome Bite needs an FAQ badly. We don't need 18 to 24 mortal wounds being thrown out even before you get to the rest of its profile. Abhorrent Archregent, the summoner fighter with a very strong combat buff spell, should also go up. So he costs 200, and he summons 200. He costs a net 0. I think he should cost more than 0. Ghoul King on Terrorgeist should also go up, of course, but not too much if the bite is fixed. If it's not, then he should go up a lot. The Zombie Dragon version is honestly fine. I mean, being undercosted isn't in and of itself a crime, though someone should probably tell GW that before they get to Stormcast. Anyway, the Chalice Endless spell is strong, but we don't want to, over-nerf them, so it's probably fine. Also, keep in mind they're getting 2 fewer command points and worse triumphs to start due to the, new triumph rules. So we have to be aware of nerfs coming in from other angles. You don't want to get Beastclaw 2017, where you get targeted nerfs on top of collateral ones from all angles and end up being dog shit forever. Buffs required, yes, I mean, you could tap Crypt Horrors down 20. Turns out not flying sucks. Most important issue, Savage Strike obviously, but in my opinion also the Gruesome Bite mount trait, as fishing for 6 mortals per bite is one of the main reasons this monster is able to consistently put out such preposterous damage. So what happened? Well, they did one of the 2 main things. Also, it's fixed in my suggested way, by being on the charge only. They didn't touch the bite, which is a shame. This keeps him incredibly powerful, and with only a 20-point increase, he still easily punches hundreds of points above his weight class. But now you have to actually play the game a little to use him optimally. No more running forward and not carrying at all if someone charges you, knowing that you'll win no matter what. Although again, why the one that is better remains cheaper and the one that is worse is more expensive is still a complete fucking mystery to me. Like, what are they doing? Do they know what these guys do? Archregent went up, and now costs a net 40 points, which to me feels a bit low for a 4-up safe wizard with decent attacks and an amazing buff spell. Usually the cheapest casters that GW tends to allow are about 100 points, and those tend to be slow with bad profiles. I guess 40 is better than 0 though, which is what he used to cost, so fair enough. I'm just happy he costs anything. Ghoul King on foot and Endless spells went up. Even the bad 2, which I feel was unnecessary, but okay. Hey, they dropped Crypt Horrors 10, nice. Judges, will anyone take them now over Flayers? Nope, try again. Grade D+. They hit Savage Strike in the right way, which is kind of surprising at this point. And they made Archregent cost points at all, and FEC doesn't suck now, which was a danger. But man, that bite is a problem. Legions of Nagash, tier 1.5 moving into GHB19. They were the second best army after DOK for 6 months or so, but steadily declined ever since. While significantly weaker than DOK, they were much more popular and garnered a lot of complaints about Nagash himself. Even though he wasn't the reason why the army was good, it was reanimation, which all generals get, and in fact the best lists didn't play him even 6 months ago, though the suboptimal build featuring him was the most popular. I really don't know which way they'll go on it, which is why he was my litmus test for this GHB. If Nagash went up, I'd know that they just respond to the loudest voices even if they're wrong, and that I could expect disappointment for the book elsewhere. Nerfs required. For tier 1.5, no. While everyone was wondering which way to nerf Grimghast Reapers 6 months ago, the community was unaware that the next 5 2nd edition battle tomes almost to a book would be hard counters. What I was more concerned with over my Christmas show was how to fix the problem of Nighthaunt's best unit being better in someone else's army. GGR were probably too good at the time with reanimation, but LON itself was fine and I felt like the metagame would adapt, especially with new books coming out. And I was right. Oh. What's this? Oh. Check out my fortune here. Humility is a virtue. I said humility was important 6 months ago. What was I saying? Oh yeah, buffs required. Actually, yes, and many. We have another Gloomspite and Beasts of Chaos situation on our hands here. A soup book where some stuff is real good and everything else is shit. If anyone wondered why every LON list feels exactly the same, even though they have 41 War Scrolls, I mean, there it is. Why does everyone use Grimghast Reapers or Black Knights if you're a hipster? Because everything else is too slow to play to objectives. Power projection is a real problem in LON. Even Graveguard at formerly Grimghast prices wouldn't be that great. I mean, move 4. Why does no one use Morghasts or Blood Knights or Vargheists? Because they don't have the summonable keyword, and that's where all the strength of the entire faction comes from. Unless you put them to Skaven levels of undercosted, they just wouldn't be competitive without that. Why don't you see a lot of hero diversity? Because all the good abilities are on the cheapest ones, and if your general dies, you lose the game, so the best choice is an Ethereal Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon. Now that you can only buy 1 extra command point, Neferata can safely come down 100, and for that matter Manfred, the most overcosted of the 3. Archon, as I said, can stay where he is. He's fragile, his spell is nerfed, and you can't stack command points anymore. The mid-range ones like Coven Throne and Bloodseeker Paladin can cost too much and have unfocused random abilities, so down a lot. Vordrai should cost the same as a vanilla Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon because he sure isn't better. Turns out artifacts are important. If Grimghasts go up, then Black Knights need to come down 20 to compensate for no good fast summonable unit. While this does reward hipsters, Black Knights look cool, so I think we calls it even. Most important issue, internal balance and heroes coming down a great deal. So what happened? Nagash up 50. Looks like my litmus test was spot on for this GHB, as things have not been good so far with these changes. This alone would drop him from suboptimal general to sort of viable general, except then Direwolf's also up, and Necromancer's also up, and Spell Portal also up, and Grimghast's way up, so this kills the crab. If you are on the best lists, you're hurt by these taxes. If you are on Nagash and Grimghast Reapers, then you can maybe play a bare bones list with 20-man units, but to be honest, you're competitively shelved. And to be even more honest, you already were. I mean, strikes first. You can reanimate as many Grimghast Reapers as you want. They'll lose at the beginning of combat either way. And finally, if you just really wanted to play with Nagash, but didn't jump on the Grimghast bandwagon, you got completely screwed. Graveguard are way too slow, even at their better cost, and your power projection weakness just became critical. Nagash has now become the supreme Shelfomancer. The first thing we all said after Grimghasts came out was, you don't want to do the stupidest thing and just make them go up, because that would hurt Nighthaunt too much and the faction didn't do anything wrong. Well, they did the stupidest thing. Some stuff went down a little, but none of that matters at all, even Graveguard, though for non-competitive folks or Death March, this is a welcome change, as is 140 for Hexrace, which was a nice one. Grade, big F. They were the most popular army last season, but not the best, as Daughters of Cain had much better win percentages and more top finishes, even while out-represented 2-1. But LONs still took the bigger nerfs. Seems backwards. Nighthaunt. Low tier 2, but it's complicated. As an inexpensive starter army, it was very popular with new players who lost a lot. And competitive players who liked Ghosty Boys just played LON instead because its allegiance abilities were way better. That being said, there are good builds that some savvy players tried, and some did well. The downside is you're fishing for natural 10s, which holds them back. But when they worked, they could compete with the activation war bullshit that, LON basically can't. Nerfs required. No, they need help, actually. But LONs still took the bigger nerfs. Seems backwards. At least Bladegeist Revenants are still great, though not Battleline. Buffs required. Put Mortality Glass Man in the app. I can't believe he still isn't there. What? Oh, they just banned him instead? Oh, for fuck's sake. Your named heroes need to go considerably down, like 40 or more for each of them. Black Coat should be a flat 200 at most, Spirit Torment 80, Blanket 10 or 20 for most troops that LON can't use, Hexrays at 140 at most, and we already know that happened because we just talked about LON. Most important thing, don't do what we know you did to Grimghast, I guess? Nah, I'm just kidding. Black Coach playable, please. I think that's the most important. So what happened? Grimghast's up, sadly, and Black Coach is still very unplayable. However, blanket reductions on a whole bunch of shit, and Bladegeist Revenants are still great, and Hexrays are fast mobile anvils at a decent price now, and they're Battleline. Mortality Glass Man was just banned instead of added to the app, which I'm actually fine with. Releasing limited edition models with overpowered rules is bullshit, and I hope they never do it again. Please have this be a policy moving forward. Grade, I don't know, D+, maybe C-. While their changes range from dumb to okay, and the points of stuff like Grimghast and Black Coach were super shitty, Nighthaunt accidentally getting Necromancers changes the fucking game, and turns this grade into a B. They're legit now. Beastclaw Raiders. Bottom of tier 4 / top of F tier. When you suck at objectives, have no buffs, no bodies, no flying, and low damage, this is where you land. Also, you lose to Chaff, debuffs, activation wars, honestly most other armies in the game, and still suffer from FAQ nerfs from 2017. And your Allegiance abilities suck. Flat 30% win rate. Nerfs required. I wouldn't think so, but I didn't think STD needed any either. Buffs required. Honestly, I'm just waiting on a 2nd edition book, so whatever happens in the GHB, it's whatever. That being said, Mournfang would be viable at 120 for 2. That's an aggressive cost for them, and I think they would be played. Most important issue, make Stone Skeleton great again. So what happened? Stone Skeleton is not great again. But we did get a second FAQ to Thundertusks to explain a second time that you still can't run and shoot them, which was what the last FAQ said and what the original book said. I don't know who keeps asking, but dude, they really can't do that, I assure you. Mournfang are now down to 140, which is still, not competitive or anything, but at least they know which direction to go. Also, I can't help but quibble with the community article a little bit here. They called Mournfang a staple, and that 20 points off the 300-point Beast Riders would give us more room for allies, and here I must disagree a little bit. Beast Riders are not played, and so we don't get more points in our lists for allies if we aren't taking Beast Riders in the first place. And Mournfang aren't a staple. They are not played at all, aside from, the odd BBH list. We play Yetis. We don't want to play Yetis, because they look fucking stupid, but you gotta work with the war scrolls you're given, so we do. However, their dig about allies hurts a little bit, but it is exactly correct. When I tooled around with lists after the changes, the extra points I got from Yetis going down 10 got me a Fungoid Shaman, so I guess well played and nice burn. Oh right, the Awful Hunterman went down 20, so our min Battleline taxes got a rebate, that's nice. And our Mega Battalions went down a lot, which was in danger of getting me excited until I noticed you still can't play Svard Alpha Stun since it requires 5 Behemoths minimum. I was hoping we'd get a Grizzlegorian FAQ that broke the monster limit for no reason like theirs does, but no dice. Grade C. Again, I wasn't expecting anything, and I'm still just waiting on a book. The points changes are nice, and they let us know that stuff sucks, kinda. On the other hand, the only 2 battle plans we were okay on before just got updated to let not only monsters, but also battle line capture. So we officially suck on every single battle plan now. And Triumphs got a lot worse, which we heavily relied on. It turns out GHB19 is actually quite a big net nerf to Beastclaw due to those 2 facts, even with the points changes. But I'm completely numb to getting worse at this point, so I guess I don't care. Bone Splitters. Tier 4 with very low representation. With soft matchups, they've gone 4-1 a couple of times on the back of their strong but nerfed 2 years in a row shooting in Kun and Ruck. Nerfs required? No. Buffs required? Yes. They could really do for one of those Zinch-style across-the-board 20-point reductions to troops and even more for the battalions. Most important issue, not to just completely ignore them entirely. So, what changed if you couldn't already tell from my leading question there? Yep, it's fucking nothing. Don't even pretend. Didn't even pretend to look into them. I mean, even Greenskins had a chariot go down, and they aren't even real. Look, I get that everyone hated Kun and Ruck, but everyone hated Change House too when you brought that shit back, so I mean, come on. Gloomspite Gitz. Tier 1-5, but it's complicated. While the majority of Gitz players get smashed, they have a 43% win rate, the army is very hard to play, and top players are doing well with hundreds of bodies plus every hit penalty they have access to in lists. Nerfs required? Probably not. And I hope not to the boingy boys, that would be a shame. Buffs required? Yes. Even though they're 1-5, they're one of the big soup books, and the non-cookie cutter stuff lags pretty far behind. Trogus of all kinds could drop 20, while Dankhold, Malag, and Trogboss need drastic reductions due to their Sigorian war scrolls. The Spider faction could also see some healthy drops, especially their Battle Line's massive regiment. The troops are really the thing there. Loon Boss on Mangler Squigs could go down if we're wishlisting because he looks amazing. Most important issue, let them take Gabapalooza units individually instead of all or nothing. Okay, maybe this isn't the most pressing issue, so how about just Scragrot down? So what happened? Fellwater's down to 150 and Rockgut's down to 140. This is a nice buff to part of the keyword soup. Your endless spells moved around a little. I'm not sure why the Shroom needed to go up, but these are minor. Spiders got some nice reductions, but it was the heroes instead of the troops, which is a bit of a shame. They could have used a more meaningful bump. But I like the GW was trying to buff the other two sub-factions here. Sadly, the characterful Gabapalooza models are still locked in a prison and chained together on the shelf. Most importantly, the boingy boys got through without a nerf, huzzah. Grade B-. Is this the first faction that got a B? Maybe the second. 2 out of 14, huh? Gutbusters. Tier 4, 38% win rate. These guys need massive help. Nerfs required? God no. Buffs required. Many, but luckily, it's easy. Points are as simple as compare and contrast. Ogres could be 100 flat and lose their massive regiment discount or keep it, whichever. And Leadbelchers should be the same cost as Ogres because they're honestly very comparable. And their ranged sucks. Tyrant is safe at 120 because only one can hold an artifact, so there won't be any more than one with good damage if they run multiples. For the Butcher, I'd like to see you remove his random roll for the buff and just have it not work on a 1 and, you know, chokes on the stuff. In which case he can stay at 140, but if you keep it random, put him at 100. If you decided that Grey Seer is fine at 140, then 100 is more than fair for a Butcher. If you directly compare Iron Guts to Trogus, the Trogus are better. And currently the Trogus are 150 at most, so Iron Guts should be less than that. Both of the bad artillery can drop to 100. Firebelly can safely go to 80 with a spell as bad as his, and Maneaters should be 10 higher than whatever Iron Guts end up at. Most important issue. This is the 4th General's Handbook, and it's long since time to give allegiance abilities to Gutbusters. The GHB no longer has any need for Slanesh, Flesh Eater, Scryer, Pestilence, Brayherd, or Fireslayers, and their allegiance abilities have been removed from it, so there's plenty of empty pages to fill. So what happened? Actual nothing. No points changes, no allegiance abilities for the 4th GHB in a row. Why? Because a book is on the way? That's what people said after the General's Handbook 2016, and after the General's Handbook 2017, and after the General's Handbook 2018. If it is in fact true this time, in 2019, you might have added a little note that said as much, because it's starting to feel like the boy who cried wolf here. Hey, no changes right now, but look forward to the next Battle Tome coming soon. Like, that's all you had to say. And, you know, people's disappointment and hurt would be turned into excitement. Might have even curbed the anger at the dickhead community article snark. Now, it could be that whomsoever wrote copy on that article just simply didn't know that Gutbusters weren't any good. But sometimes ineptitude from an authority can come across as malicious, and this regularly occurs with these articles. Grade F. Is F- allowed? Ironjaws. Top of Tier 4, 38% win rate, the same as Gutbusters by the way, but with a few very rare good finishes. They need a lot of help. Nerfs required? No. Buffs required. Rework allegiance abilities, and pretty considerable points drops for your heroes, although not necessarily for your troops, although brutes could go down a decent chunk, because they're just really caught between Gore-Grunta being way better and Ardboys being a much better anvil. And their battalions could drop as well. They're all pretty expensive, even though they're good. Sometimes how to help a struggling faction is to make their stuff cost too cheap. Because if you look at all the best armies in the game, their stuff is all too cheap. I mean, look at fucking Skaven. Most important issue, rework allegiance abilities to be less annoying and random. If so, the points might not need to change as much. So what happened? The best of all timelines, Mighty Destroyers, is turned into a command ability and now works on demand instead of rolling for and only working on a 6 or a 4 for your general. They also got spell lores, which is a big surprise, but very welcome. Now most of them aren't very good, but who cares? You gotta teleport. And Ironclad did take a hit, although it's a buff if you're the kind of orc that likes Ethereal. Your artifacts are mostly the same, but Metal Rippo's Claws, which used to increase Ren by 1 and now makes something Ren 3, just went from like a spiky glove to a sharpened satellite dish of pain. They also got some points reductions, though nothing too major. Ardboys are now 140, which seems aggressive for 24 wounds with Rend, but I'm in favor of being bold when it comes to buffing weak factions, so let's go for it. For once. Let's go for it for once in this book. Grade A. This is what it looks like when GW tries to help a weak faction on purpose. From this we can solve the mystery. They gave one struggling faction the changes it needed and basically ignored all the other ones completely. My question is why? Like 12 armies needed this. Why did you only do one? Well, that's destruction. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Moving on to order. Collegiate Arcane. Not a faction, since it has no battle line, but I wanted to just point out that it got a lot of cost reductions, and a split war scroll for Luminarch of Hysh that puts it pretty ambitiously costed. It looks like they're trying to buff Mixed Order here. Cool. Mixed Order basically didn't exist for the last year, so it's nice to give them a shot. Darkling Covens, Tier 4. Though there are those who theorize they could be a Tier 3, an extremely low representation, 0.3%, has some harsh matchups and weaknesses to hit penalties, leaves them mostly unexplored. Crippled by very weak heroes, especially the dragon, who had the bad luck of getting a shit stain of a war scroll. I mean, her save is bad, her spell is bad, and the breath weapon is bad. How much worse can you be for something on a dragon? Nerfs required? Not at all. Buffs required? Yes. Executioners need to get welcomed into 2nd edition, with natural 6 language added to their weapon proc. And probably a minor point cost reduction as well, although I'm not crossing my fingers since Blight Kings didn't get it, and I thought that was a fucking shoo-in. Blackguard are certainly already, like, your best unit. Bleak, Dark, and Dreads could go to 90, but honestly, your issue isn't having too few guys. Thrall Warhost is where some real work can be done here, and dropping it to 100 will help Covens without just, say, making Blackguards undercosted for other people to poach. Sorceress on Black Dragon needs a new spell that isn't ass, or like a new War Scroll, but that's probably not going to happen. So, 200 points, probably, at most. So they can run multiples, maybe, or just take one in the battalion and no more, because it's still bad at 200. This wouldn't be problematic because, I mean, she's fucking terrible. Most important issue, spell lores for the Dark Elf army where every single hero is a spellcaster. Also, can we rework these command traits a little bit? One of them makes your hero a wizard if he isn't one already, and you have 2 heroes, and they're both wizards already. So, I mean, it's actually pretty embarrassing that they wrote this rule, considering there are only 2 heroes, so it's not like you forgot any. So, what changed? No spell lores, copy-pasted allegiance rules with one single change to one trait. Sorceress on Black Dragon down to 260, so still horrible. And Bleak Swords / Dread Spears went down 10, which is whatever. Blackguard down to 120, which makes them competitively costed. They were already your best unit, and now they're just light years ahead of all of your other troops. Executioners are still stuck in 1st edition with their 6 to hit, and, you know, we kind of figured that with Blight Kings not seeing the change. Battalion the same. Wow. Grade F. This faction as well had a bunch of easy slam dunks, and all were skipped over. I'm getting so sick of saying this with this GHB. I mean, it's cool that blackguards are great now, but man, they could have got something real. Daughters of Cain, S tier. The best army in the game since their book release last year, all the way up until FEC and Skaven came out. With a win rate, if you factor out mirror matches, in excess of 70%. But then after FEC and Skaven came out, they dropped healthily behind those two, although still above all the other peasants. Why? 25mm base 3 or 4 attacks per model hordes with great buffs that can run and charge, resourceless battleshock immunity, and a 5-up re-rollable death save on your main unit. And super cheap as well. Plus an invulnerable flying monster. Weaknesses. Partial Death Star. You only have Nurgle durability if you fail your 3-up prayer, and no activation wars, although Sisters of Slaughter can get around that on your turn. Nerfs required, yes, and everyone was quite surprised they weren't 6 months ago during the adjustment. Unlike Nagash, they actually needed it back then and still do now. There are 2 key issues here, and that is Hagnar's 5-up death save coupled with the prayer that should not be that lets you reroll it, and the Hag Queen, who is Skaven levels of comically undercosted. Witch Brew lets you, once for each Hag Queen, choose one of your units to be immune to battle shock and reroll failed wounds. Just works, no rolling, no command points spent. Also, she's a priest and gets a prayer and a prayer lore. These effects would cost 120 minimum, maybe 140 on any other army, and she would still be considered very powerful. And yet she's 60 here. It's crazy. Buffs required, I guess, as bow snakes could easily go down to 120 with their math. Most important issue, Hag Queen is a points fix, so it's easy, but nothing else really is. Hagnar's 5-up and Blessing of Cain prayer just should not exist at all. They both need an FAQ rewrite. But aside from that, DOK could be very strong but not problematic if these were the only changes. We're not trying to beast claw anyone here. So what happened? Witch Elves went up to Sister of Slaughter price, which makes sense since now you have a choice between 4 attacks or combat tricks. Hag Queen also went up 50%, which percent-wise is maybe the biggest increase ever. But she still ends up at 90, which is still one of the most aggressively undercosted buff heroes in the game, so I don't know. I mean, either you think Evocators are a problem at 200 because in a vacuum they're undercosted, even though their faction isn't great, or you put Hag Queen at in a vacuum undercosted 90, you know, not both. Do you get what I mean? Like in a vacuum, her abilities deserve 120 or 140, yet they kept her low not to hurt Daughters of Cain too much. Where was that care in Nagash or Stormcast? It's also a shame Hagnar is still rerolling 5-up death saves, because no one should ever be allowed to reroll death saves. I don't even think they should stack. Grade C? At least you didn't destroy them like Nagash, but there were better ways to do this, and in the end, they were better than him before he got destroyed and DOK just got a little haircut. Where's the consistency? Devoted of Sigmar, only one person out of the 12,000 recorded matches has ever played this army, and he went 2-3. So there's no real way to say how good they are, and they don't really have a tier. Witch Hunter went down 40, and they didn't get allegiance abilities, but I guess I understand as there seems to be, like, no demand. I gotta be consistent though, so I guess F. Maybe with interesting allegiance rules in the GHB, like someone might have wanted to buy them. Dispossessed, F tier. Commonly referred to as the worst army in the game, and although that's technically incorrect, it's close enough. Bad allegiance rules, slow as fuck, low damage, overpriced guys even though they're horde, and priests with no prayer lores. They need help real bad. Nerfs required, God no, but would you believe they got one? Buffs required, yes, and many. Points could fix a lot here, although at a risk of making this like horde army even more hordy, and like how many guys do you have to run to be okay? Warriors and Longbeards are probably fine. Unforged could go down to about 50 as he's a pure battalion tax and terrible. Your other heroes could drop 20, and it's long since time to make Hammerers and Ironbreakers both 120/300 massive regiment. Iron Drakes are where most of your power comes from, and bringing them down to 150 could do a lot to help out. It's possible Mixed Order would be tempted by them at that price, but look, a byproduct of your guys not being shit is that someone else might want them ever. So Without useful allegiance abilities, there really isn't a way around this, and mixed order doesn't even exist at the moment, so it's certainly not something to keep a faction shit because you're afraid that if they had anything good, mixed order might take it. That just doesn't make any sense. Most important issue, expanded allegiance rules and give them a prayer book with a teleport, and fix the delay on that awful pickaxe. So what happened? Pickaxe range changed from 3 inches to 6 inches. Everything else was copied from 2018. What an insult. Like, how close you had to stand the guy next to the thing didn't matter at all. Like, why did you even bother changing that? I mean, and you kept the delay on it too. Like, your cursor was already there, and you could have done something useful, and instead you did this. That affects nothing. And warriors went up, as in a nerf to one of the worst armies in the game. Why? Because 4 mixed order players used them to not win anything last year? I thought you wanted to buff mixed order when you made Luminarch better. This is inconsistent again. I mean, the heroes are down a little and hammers are down to 140, but Iron Drakes and Iron Breakers are unchanged, and hammers should have been 120. Grade F. Free Peoples. Tier 3 with a 40% win rate and very low representation. They have decent shooting with crossbowmen, and their critical lack of mobility is made up for by running multiple well-costed free guild generals on griffins, as their cavalry is unfortunately saddled with, get it, bad war scrolls that have dropped in points every time and they're just still bad. Allegiance abilities are okay, but it's kind of annoying to play with. Nerfs required? No. Buffs required? Yes, but not as substantial as those of tier 4 or below. The meta is turning towards shooting being necessary again, so with all these shooting armies, we got to keep that in mind here. Great sorters, like hammerers, could finally come down to 120 and really see play there. And this would be a welcome change, as free guild players just want an excuse to run their coolest looking guys. You could drop the cavalry again to see if this time it sticks, but a more useful change would be to address the cost of their 1 battalion. 210 is nuts for this thing, and the taxes within it are massive. I suggest transposing the first 2 digits of that number, so like 120 is more like it, especially since it needs 3 pure tax units, and those should go down. If you don't know which 3 units are pure tax in a free guild battalion, then you shouldn't be working on points. Most important issue, don't increase their griffins in a misguided attempt to hurt non-existent mixed order lists. This army needs the speed. Sustained. Anyway, yes, griffins went up and that's dumb. But great sorters are 120. Huzzah. Also, your bad cavalry went down a little. But, man, it would have been cool for that battalion to be playable. Grade F. Fire Slayers. Tier 1, some say high tier 1. Most of this power comes from 30 Hearthguard Berserkers. With buffs, they are effectively immortal, and unlike most super anvils, they still do great damage and have activation powers on top of it. The only thing holding them back are general slowness, and the blob is super expensive and can't be in more than one place at a time, making some battle plans problematic. Nerfs required. No real consensus on this one. Some say make their death save a 5-up, some say rewrite Battlesmith, some say they're fine, some say their points should go up. But really, if you charge 740 points of buffed Hearthguard Berserkers, expecting to accomplish anything, it's your own goddamn fault when you die. It's still probably early, so let's see how the battle plans shake this one out, especially for the one obvious thing. Buffs required. Same as the above, willing to wait on battle plans. Most important issue. Hermdar command ability needs to only work on the charge. Activation war responsibly after all. Also, FAQ the wall wording, so you don't break line of sight by standing in front of it. Also, Doomseeker's ranged weapon has a typo, it probably shouldn't be 1-inch range. So what happened? Doomseeker's axe, indeed, FAQ'd to 8 inches like was intended, clearly just a typo. No other changes at all though, that sucks. I was hoping to rein in some more of this activation war bullshit that everyone hates we've been suffering from beyond just Grizzlegore, but whatever. Grade D. Ideneth Deepkin, Tier 1. Either near the top or near the bottom, depending on who you ask. Why? 2 full shipwrecks anywhere on the board after you pick sides, and put both of them in the worst possible place for your opponent. And then the best cavalry in the game that can also ambush with charge bonuses. Weakness. No bodies, bad magic, bad or no ranged, very fragile troops. While they often get high finishes, they're almost always like 4-1 record bridesmaids rather than undefeated cheese. Nerf required. Eels plus 20 probably. They're just too good for what they cost. Also, Soul Scryer bonuses should not stack, or he should go up in cost, one of the two. Buffs required? Actually yes, and surprisingly lots of them for a tier 1 army. Let me explain. We have another Beasts of Chaos situation on our hands here. While the eels are indeed too good, everything else ranges from overpriced to staggeringly overpriced. Slightly overpriced would be Thralls and Reavers, Soul Render, Sharks, and staggering would be Eidolons and Turtle. Thralls can easily go to 120/300, as their save is bad, and 32mm bases plus 1-inch reach puts a hard cap on their combat effectiveness. You can only ever get one rank of about 10 of them into combat after all. Particularly the massive regiment discount needs to be aggressive for 30. And Soul Render at 60 to promote anyone playing something other than eels. A more fan strategy would be nice to see, and we can encourage it with these points. For Caster Eidolon, he is worse than Verminlord Warpseer, who is now 300 points. So to account for different allegiances, we'll split the difference and say that he should also be 300 even though he is worse at the same cost. Keep in mind they pointed him at 440 originally, as an example of how wrongly he is costed. His spell would be great if it had more than a 12-inch range, which actually ruins it. Combat Eidolon should cost as much as whatever 6 eels go up to, as 6 eels may be way more durable, way more damage, are faster, and capture easier, but his footprint is smaller and he can hold an artifact, so. The turtle just doesn't really have a job. It's a War Scroll problem. He has 16 wounds on a 3-up save. That's pretty durable, but what does he do? Less damage than 10 Thralls fighting big targets on average, so he's absolutely not there for damage. His cover aura doesn't affect him, and every IDK army gets cover for free on turn 1 and 5 from Tides of Death anyway. For the 3/5 of the game where you don't get cover for free, your 100-point Tidecaster could just cast a lore spell on a 5 to produce the same effect if you really wanted it, and most don't. And so what does he do? He costs a lot, mostly, 380 moving into the GHB, and for a minor defense buff troop escort with bad damage, he would need to be pretty cheap to be playable. At a flat 300, some people might start to test the waters with him, but he wouldn't be a very viable choice until the upper 200s. I can't see them doing anything close to this, since rumor has it this guy started at over 400 in playtesting, and so he's just one of those big models in AOS that GW is totally out of touch with the points on. Most important issue, the diversity of this army is at critically low levels. Creating a Namarti core incentive and getting Eidolon Turtle in the right solar system of points are necessary. Did no one ever just sit down and compare the units against each other in their own book? 6 eels at 320 or even 360 if they go up 20 per are much better than Eidolons, Turtles, Thralls, Sharks, anything. So what happened? Kind of nothing. Eels went up 10, but then Thralls went down 10. And then Soulscryer went up 30, and then Render went down 20. The most competitive IDK list lost 1 extra command point and nothing else. The full spam lists, which were worse, lost 1 min unit somewhere. Caster Eidolon needed to go down well over 100 points. He went down 20. I'm not even going to say it was a good try. It was pathetic. Turtle went down 30, and he could have gone down 100 and sucked. So, yeah, they're both still quite unplayable. Sharks went down a lot, but they still suck, mostly because their War Scroll sucks. While Namarti went down 10 for min units, the cost of 30 stayed the same, which means you're actually less incentivized to try more fan strategies than you were before. Even if the writing might have been on the wall about how good they can be on 32 mils with 1-inch reach, it would have been nice for someone to ever try that. Grade F. Eels got a smaller nerf than Enlightened BOC did, even though IDK is way better. And now there's even less incentive to play Neapolitan IDK than there was before. Caradron Overlords. Tier 3, but it's complicated. Their shooting and boat movement is good enough to fight back against some of the bullshit activation war armies, and yet they struggle against random middle-of-the-road strategies, so, you know, it's weird. They're also super weak on the hero battle plans. Nerfs required. Less so in Nerf, but just a reminder, like Change Host, that Clown Car should never again be a thing. Please don't let boats carry an entire KO army of balloon men hooked up on the outside when the new book comes out. Buffs required. Same place as Beast Claw. This GHB is whatever. They're waiting on a new book, you know? So what happened? Many big points drops, especially the Frigate. Sky Wardens are back to where they used to be now, and a legitimate alternative to engine riggers again. Chemist is back to where he used to be as well. For those concerned about the return of Change Host, that army's boogeyman is also back, so maybe fair is fair. Clown Car was not the hero we wanted, it was the hero we deserved. I don't like you, but every time you decapitate every Change Host hero at the top of turn 1, brings a smile to my face. Grade C. Pretty much the same grade for Beast Claw, except KO is good now, and Beast Claw is worse. But whatever. Order Draconis, Tier 3, and 49% win rate, but I think they're better than their representation here. It's just people stopped playing them entirely when Doppelganger Cloak got nerfed, and better Alpha Strike armies came out, like IDK or BOC, or Slanesh for that matter. Nerf required. Not at all. No one plays this, and it's not problematic whatsoever. Buff required. Dragon Blades should be 120. They're actually not very good, and this army needs more room to fit in stuff after the requisite 3 Dragon Lords. Most important thing, Elf Soup can't come out fast enough. So what happened? Dragon Lords actually went up a lot, 40 points each, and Order Draconis plays 4, so you might be tempted to say that the army is dead. But you'd be wrong. The army was already dead. It's just really dead now. The 4 Dragon lists are now 2020, even after Dragon Blades going down, so yeah, pour one out. The 3 Dragon double battalion lists are still legal, but lost their ally points, so again, probably dead. This really hurts the non-existent mixed order lists, which is strange since you buffed them once and nerfed them 3 times. I'm starting to suspect someone in charge of points had one specific list at his local store that he wants to stop losing to and decided he'd be super irresponsible with his power. It's the only thing that makes sense to me. Grade, press F to pay respects. Order Serpentis. 1 person has ever played them and they went 2 and 3. Nerf required, no. Buffs required, yes. Most important issue, allegiance abilities. What happened? Some points drops and no allegiance abilities. Grade F. The one guy who plays them is surely at least a little happy about the points drops to Knights and Chariots, but they could have gotten allegiance rules to become a real army. Phoenix Temple. Tier 3. Your battle line is extremely durable, and Frostheart Phoenixes are blazing fast and situationally invincible if there are lots of wizards around them. Downside, you don't have lots of wizards, because you can't ally in enough that are any good. You also only have 2 playable units, which is your battle line and your 1 Frost Phoenix. And you do low damage as an army. Nerfs required? 2 years ago, Frostheart Phoenix was probably worth nerfing, but here we are with like 7 new armies and a different metagame, and mixed order isn't a thing at all, so it's whatever. Buffs required. Yes, I probably sound like a broken record, but why is the Phoenix that is worse more expensive? Most important issue, Elf Soup book can't come soon enough. So what happened? Frost Phoenix went up 40, Flame Phoenix went down 20, which are sort of both the right directions, I suppose. But they did finally separate the War Scrolls of a 4-up death save and the riderless version. While no one will ever take the ones without riders, it was a good bit of house cleaning, I think. Are the Phoenix Temple lists officially dead with the game where it is in 2nd edition? Yes. Grade, press F to pay respects. Luke Stone. Currently high tier 4 from being able to surprise people, since no one knows what any of this shit does, and they have buckets of dice of shooting. Nerf required? No. Buffs required? The points are mostly fine, although Charybdis could drop significantly as it's just a battalion tax, and he kinda sucks. Most important issue, they need GHB abilities bad. So what changed? Luke Stone got some decent points drops here, so he can run a few more of the same guys, but there were no allegiance abilities added, so grade F. Seraphon. Tier 3, 45% win rate, but a few isolated high finishes due to incredibly strong teleporting and summoning, and some lucky soft matchups. Nerfs required. Engine of the Gods is probably too cheap, and due to this, it's too easy to be taken in multiples, but they have a 45% win rate, so I guess we'll let it slide. You should never be able to move after a teleport, however, and I'm going to be firm about this. Seraphon needs to get brought in line with the rest of the entire game on this one. The trade-off would be that the teleport can't fail to up consistency, and then lots of points decreases so that they'll hardly notice. We'll blind them with gifts after we take this bullshit thing from them. that only worked on a 5-up. Buffs required. A lot of internal balance needs to take place here, with a lot of real drops for underused units. Most important issue, spell lores and prayer lores. So what happened? Skinks went up, and there's no horde discount, which was unnecessary in the context of Seraphon, but done to punish people for allying them in. Here's a thought. Fix the points of those other armies so they have access to one of the most basic requirements of an army in Age of Sigmar, which is chaff, and then leave Skinks alone. Razordawn limit is put at 3, which actually really hurts. Go ask a Seraphon player about it. He'll yell at you for a while. And this probably kills Thunderquake, I think. Knights are okay now, after their points decrease. That's cool. None of the other points decreases are enough to affect anything at all. The teleport change to Allegiance rules was perfect. No more full cheating with moving after setups that no one else can do. And it can never fail, so the consistency is increased. However, they really did need those huge drops to offset this. Anyway. Okay, good news first. The race of Psychic Constellation Lichmaster Wizards got spell lores, at last. Good. Bad news. They suck. I'm not generalizing. Go read them yourself. All of them are useless. Like, they're so fucking bad. Like, they did gymnastics around Bank Vault laser beams in order to perfectly make sure that all of these spells were trash. And no prayer book, which would have been smart, as they wouldn't cause friction with your give-up spells to summon system. Grade D-, I guess? I mean, it's not an F because at least they tried to give them spells, but they just fucked up real bad. Oh no, I used the word of the day. I did say that F for fucked up real bad. Yeah, it's an F. Their nerfs were smart and hit the right spots, but then their buffs were bad. And so a net nerf for a tier 3 faction with a 45% win rate. Like, what the fuck is going on with this book? Anyway, Stormcast. Mid to low tier 2, 46% win rate. They have a few high finishes, mostly on the back of a staggeringly high representation, well over 10%, which kind of brute forced events into giving them a good result every once in a while from sheer number of attempts. Their two good lists are Anvil's Stormhost with long strikes and Ballista drop and pop one-trick pony. Shooting is the best Stormcast strategy, even though their melee guys seem at first glance to have really powerful war scrolls, but they're simply too slow and expensive and elite and weak to chaff to do much good in competitive games. While everyone was afraid of Gav Bomb evocators early on, this proved to be a pretty poor strategy and was quickly dropped by competitive Stormcast players after about their second tournament trying it out. It sure did destroy casuals, though. They are further held back by the Total Commitment battle plan, specifically screwing only them out of their allegiance abilities while leaving every other army in the whole game except for Nighthaunt at full power, and TOs fucking love putting that in packs for some reason, which just about gave Stormcast one auto loss before even driving to the venue. Nerfs required. Not for a tier 2 faction with a bad win rate, no, that would be stupid. Buffs required, yes, both to make the army better as it needs it, and it hasn't had a very good year, but also to improve internal consistency, and nearly a full relook at the entire points of all of their guys is in order here. Just like with Beasts of Chaos that didn't really happen, and just like with Nurgle that didn't really happen, and just like with a lot of armies that didn't really happen, I wonder if it'll happen here. Well, careful what you wish for, because they fucked this one up hard, and so maybe they would have screwed up Nurgle and BOC if they tried.
Smoke weed every day.
Sorry, spoilers. I'll keep reading what I wrote before the book came out. This is made more difficult by the fact that the army has so many units, and so many units that fill the same role with incredibly minor differences. Take Evocators, Retributors, Protectors, and Decimators, for instance. Of these, Evocators are clearly the best, and taken in a vacuum, you might think that 200 is too cheap for what they do. Indeed, legions of casuals called for nerfs 6 months ago. But then consider that the role of 5 really slow melee dudes for 200 is not good, and you don't want any of that in your competitive army. And even 6 months ago, they were generally avoided in favor of faster units or just ranged. See the two layers of problems here? Like, this thing seems strong, but it doesn't have a job, and people really want to nerf it, but it's not really being played, and when it is, it's losing. So what do? Then there's old first edition baggage that Stormcast just needs to rid itself of, like Liberators at 100. I don't know who needs to hear this, but Liberators fucking suck.
Smoke.
and everyone kind of knows it in their bones, right? They sucked in first edition at 100. Outside of Vanguard Wing, I guess. And they're even worse now in second edition. These guys need to go to 80, and their massive regiment needs to go down to 20, and it should cost 280 points. This would put them on par with Ardboys, except less damage and on worse bases. It'd be a good start to giving Stormcast some bodies that it has been trying to like ally in from elsewhere. And it makes a nice progression of 80 for weak numerous anvils, 120 for elite ones and sequitors, and 160 for the 3 paladins, and evocators at 200. Yes, we keep evocators at 200, and yes, all 3 other paladins go to 160, even retributors. I'm sorry, they're just not that much better than protectors, although decimators are fucking trash. For the fast stuff, evocators on Dracolines should be 260, and then the other worse ones should go down by a similar, if slightly larger percent. Fulminators are flat 200, and the others are balanced around that. For ranged, this is the thing the community whined about for a year, despite Stormcast not doing very well at all the whole year. Which means it's gonna happen. If the people complain about it, you gotta nerf it, right? Apart from power levels, there's also a negative play experience to consider here. So point taken loud and clear. Since appeasing complaints is the goal here, I mean, look, the players told you what they don't like. And they were loud and clear on this one, so make a statement and put Ballista at 150 and long strikes at 200. No shooting, no alpha shooting allowed. And then make everything else good enough that that's just okay. I mean, of the Stormcast players I talked to, very few of them actually like having to play with stupid one-trick pony ranged shit like this. They're just forced to because chaff stops them dead and all their cool stuff is way overpriced. Adjudicators should go down to 140 though, so the army has a battle line playable ranged option at a reasonable price. Due to its unique nature as the leader does most of the damage, this can't really be abused in large units, so I don't think the savings is going to compound. For monsters, as we're seeing as a theme, these are really badly pointed. We have other invulnerable monsters for 480 like Marathi, or 300 like Warpseer, and they need no babysitting at all. Stardrake is 560, and needs 1 to 200 points worth of guys helping him out. It's fine for a Stardrake to go down a solid 100 at least. Celston Prime, 300, man, he's got 8 wounds, alright? Aventus Firestrike, 280, all of his abilities are bad. Generic version, same cost as Aventus, because, well, his abilities fucking suck and he can't hold an artifact. Asteria, 180 since she can't hold an artifact. The other 2 Arcanums on mounts, 200 since they are better. And Arcanum on foot, 140. Lord Exorcist, 80, he's like if Lotan could cast a spell. Castellant, probably 120, his buff is real good and he gets a doggo. Vanguard stuff, just blank it down. Phew, okay, sorry for the long tangent, but when I say relook at everything, I meant it. Unfortunately, all the battalions are fucking trash, and so points can't fix them. How can you have written a Stormcast book 3 times in a row and still fuck? So what happened? Exactly what I hoped wouldn't happen. Nearly every single unit they were currently playing, to not end up doing very well statistically, by the way, went up. And their bad stuff went down like just the littlest touch each time, which ended up in not a lot. I've seen Stormcast armies that look okay, and go 3-2 and stuff, and they went up like 200 points. It's crazy. A huge nerf for this middle-of-the-road Tier 2 army. Hey, you know what? You and Legions and Nagash can drown your sorrows as army buddies who got done wrong this GHB, I guess. Man, for an army that hasn't been very good at all this past year, making them straight worse seems to me like a non sequitur. Anyway, Great F. Swifthawk agents. I would talk about them, but Tom already knows. Sylvaneth. Their book technically hasn't come out yet, even though everyone already knows it's a disappointment, so I guess let's move on to Wanderers. Wanderers. F tier. Although at the very top of tier F along with Beastclaw, and has a much higher win rate at 37%. This is mostly due to bad allegiance abilities and super fragile troops with lots of tiny 100-point heroes with horrible war scrolls. Nerfs required? Certainly not. Buffs required. Yes, and points can do a lot of work here. Wildwood Rangers going down to 120 with a massive regiment discount of like 320 would do a lot to give them some decent melee battle line. Sisters of the Thorn should be 160 probably. Though I would understand if they kept them high to avoid mixed order tricks, since they don't have any good targets for the spell in their own army. Sisters of the Watch need to come down drastically, like 150 range, and Wild Riders are pure attacks, so however low you are comfortable with is good. Most important issue, reimagine their allegiance abilities. They are pretty fiddly, and board edge stuff is pretty restrictive. An additional battle trait with some useful buff would be very welcome here, like retreat when activated in combat for Glade Guard, or recharging arcane bodkins on a 4-up per unit in your hero phase or something. Like spell lures would be nice for your 2 casters, especially your sorceress, because her spell is terrible. So what happened? Allegiance ability copy-paste yet again, which would be very disappointing, except I've become numb to that feeling for the rest of my life after reading this GHB. Rangers at 120 is good, but no massive regiment means they're still expensive for how fragile they are. Sisters of the Watch at 160 is good progress though. No spell lores. Grade F. As a final wrap-up, for the TOs out there, Tomb Kings are officially in the GHB. They're fully legal. Deal with it. Same with Legion of Asgore. I'm sure Rob is pleased no one can tell him he doesn't play a real army anymore. Alright, results of the changes predictions. Here we enter prediction mode. Beast of Chaos, the best enlightened builds lose about 1 unit. Struggling Neapolitan lists are hurt for no reason at all. Same tier for the spam lists, maybe lower. Competitive BOC is now the Slaanesh show, full stop. They're the new Nighthaunt, in other words. BOC tier 2, Slaanesh featuring a shitload of Bestigor, tier 1-5. Khorne. Strong players move up half a tier to 1-5, as their best list is cheaper and abuses the same kind of activation wars everyone hated in Grizzlegore, but is a very popular new player army, and with people still trying to make mortals work, the faction as a whole will still probably hover around 50%. Tzeentch. Change host. Welcome back to the soul-sucking and time-wasting round-clock boss. Can you tell I am unbiased? Tier 1. Enjoy barely finishing 2 battle rounds before dice down. Slaanesh, S tier or just wins a lot with non-stop online complaining. I think we'll have about a year to talk about what the answer is, and Mr. Mephisto might have been right when he called it before the book came out. The next Daughters of Cain indeed. None of the durability, but twice the bullshit. We'll see how hard shooting comes back. Nurgle, same tier but trending down. Nothing really happened here, and a lot needed to. The more shooting comes back, the happier Nurgle will be, kinda. Skaven skitters to the very top of S tier. The attempted nerfs were honestly pathetic, and now Skaven players waiting in the wings will feel confident in bringing out their 80 Plague Monks that they were trying to lay low on pre-GHB for the next whole year. At least you have the silver lining of those things being miserable to resolve combats with for anyone who's playing the army. Slaves to Darkness was the worst, still the worst, with no real changes at all. Does this mean a Battle Tome's on the way? Flesh Eater Courts, still S tier, but now only for players who are reasonably good. The points adjustments were very light, and the Savage Strike change just means you can't full potato and still win games. The Bite is still OP, but they did feel a pinch on command points. That being said, if you get the charge, you'll still kill anything before even triggered abilities happen. All this does is separate the good players from the bad in the standings. Legions of Nagash goes down to low tier 2, I think, as the last competitive death players drop Nagash like an HBO subscription after Game of Thrones ended. Deathmarch is still good, I guess, but who cares? Nighthaunt moves up to tier 1-5, now finally getting the last laugh and being straight better than LON, though it's held back due to randomness and lack of command points. They were low-key good before, we'll see who jumps on the train. Beastclaw Raiders, down to F tier. Thanks for the extra 20 points on Stonehorns though, that was cool. Does this mean a Battle Tome's on the way? Bone Splitters, hard to say, as hardly anyone played them before and they got no changes. Does this mean a Battle Tome's on the way? Gloomspite Geats. Stay at tier 1-5, but we could see more diversity even if it's worse than cookie cutter penalty to hit spam. At least you're not moving 200 guys a turn with Rockgut Troggoths, I'm just saying. Gitz is one of those factions that has a slow upward trend as people get better at playing a difficult army. Gutbusters, still tier 4 as they got nothing besides a dank meme. Does this mean a battle tome's on the way? Ironjaws, the one bad faction out of 9 that GW actually did their job on. The best players might climb all the way up to the bottom of tier 1-5. But it's a popular army and it's hard to play as well, so I think low tier 2, high tier 3 for the majority, which is still a big improvement. Darkling Covens, probably still tier 4 as no one plays them and their changes weren't relevant enough to move the dial. Does this mean a battle tome's on the way? Daughters of Cain, still bottom of S tier. The average list lost a superfluous Medusa or something and their problematic rules are unchanged. The free win on hero and monster battle plans got harder to cash in on though. Dispossessed. While their points moved slightly, an extra 100 odd points is not going to bring them out of F tier with zero help on allegiance abilities, iron drakes, or that awful pickaxe. Does this mean a battle tome's on the way? Free Peoples, same tier, possibly lower, as the average list got worse, but their melee unit is playable now. It's a shame nothing happened to their allegiance abilities. Does this mean a battle tome's on the way? Fireslayers, still tier 1 obviously, since nothing changed, though depending on the TO packs, they might drop half a tier from those 8 objective battle plans. Idneth Deepkin, still tier 1, the best lists lost 1 command point, ooh. No diversity added, it's still eels or go home. Sad. Quadrant Overlords, easily jump up a tier, or more depending on how much shooting comes back. Does this mean a battle tome's on the way? Order Draconis, dead. Phoenix Temple, dead. Order Serpentis, didn't really exist before, and I see no reason why it would start now with no changes. Does this mean a battle tome's on the way? Luke Stone, same tier, possibly trending down the more locals get used to playing against it. Surprise Factor is a strong tool, and they still didn't get any allegiance abilities. Does this mean a battle tome's on the way? Seraphon. I had them in tier 3, which is lower than most people rated them moving into GHB19, mostly because I put less stock in that one Adepticon win than most did. They don't look better, that's for fucking sure. Does this mean a battle tome's on the way? Stormcast. They were tier 2, now they're probably down to the cusp of 2, maybe 3. If TOs finally kick their total commitment addiction, they could end up in the same place. Sylvaneth. With the old book, the best players were 1-5, and the new book seems worse. I'm really looking forward to seeing them in the meta moving forward, and I hope that I'm super wrong. Wanderers. They had some decent points changes, but to bring them out of F tier and into tier 4, they would need someone to ever play them. And their Legion's abilities stayed the same. Does this mean a battle tome's on the way? Legion of Asgore. Jump up at least half a tier from actually having allies now. Tomb Kings got officially added to the GHB, and are now a full-fledged army that the TO can't tell you can't play. Does this mean a battle tome's on the way? Bretonia got officially added to the GHB, and so by the rules, it's a real army and you can play it at tournaments. Does this mean a battle tome's on the way? So how do I feel? Disappointed. The changes were wildly inconsistent. Top tier armies like Daughters of Cain and Flesh Eater Courts got the lightest of haircuts with the greatest of care, while middling ones like Stormcast and Legions of Nagash took hundreds of points off the top. Internal balance was just not taken seriously for the few factions that they even tried it for, and most were passed over entirely. Ironjaws got a proper General's Handbook overhaul, and then they started to give Seraphon spell lores and just gave up, relying on copy-pasting terrible ones from last year for the rest of Allegiances, and not adding any new ones with the extra pages gained from 6 factions being taken out from last year. In a word, the book is incomplete. Meeting engagements is in the rough draft stage, and yet it was shipped anyway. We got alpha test rules that were partially hotfixed into beta from the FAQ, but the format is still not ready. So we have incomplete points, and incomplete allegiances, and an incomplete new alternative 1K format that no one wanted. I certainly wish they would have finished their work on what the GHB is supposed to be for before spending lots of time and effort on some random extra side format. Even if it wasn't broken on arrival, you gotta do your chores before you go out and play. Now maybe Gutbusters are getting a book reveal this weekend, and that's why nothing happened here. Keeping in mind that's what people said after the last 4 years of General's Handbooks, let's pretend it's true this time. The sources of the rumors are better this time, after all. With how little work was done on allegiances, that would mean a lot of armies are getting books in the next 6 months, and I doubt they have all 10 plus battle tomes slated for imminent release. Hence my meta reaction joke about inference of inaction equals battle tome earlier. Wait a minute. Incomplete and largely phoned in? Disappointing and showing a clear lack of things it should contain? What if the GHB itself is an army? Does this mean the GHB battle tome's on the way?